Welcome back to the 1090 podcast. I'm here with Adriana Jones, who is a badass and a hero of mine. Um, and every episode we do when we interview someone is usually pretty rough. But this one is next level, just terrible. So, just a warning, this might be really hard to listen to. The story is going to include 9 people dying, 3 moms, and 6 children. Right, Adriana?
Yes.
One of them is your sister. And not just them dying, but they were brutally murdered by the cartel. So it's not going to, it's just really hard. So there is our warning, and I'm going to read this obituary that you sent me. And I think I have to give a warning for this obituary. This is going to be rough. So now's your chance. Okay. Obituary for the Langford, Johnson, and Miller families. It is with profound sadness that we remember the lives lost in a heinous and brutal attack that claimed members of the Langford, Johnson, and Miller families. Donna Langford Ray, 43 years old, and her sons Trevor and Rogan. Trevor was 11, Rogan was 3. Tragically lost their lives to cartel gun violence. Donna's surviving children, Kylie, 15, shot in the foot, Devin, 14, who courageously walked 9 miles to find help, Mackenzie, 9, shot in the arm and lost in the mountains for 12 hours, Cody is 8 years old, who was shot in the face, hip, and leg with his jaw destroyed, Jake Langford and Brixton. Brixton's 9 years old, shot across his chest.
No.
Sorry, am I messing this up?
Brixton is the baby.
Oh, Brixton. 9 months old. I'm so sorry. 9 months old. Shot across his chest.
And Xander was a survivor as well.
Sorry, there's just so many people.
No, I know.
So, okay, I'm just going to keep going. Christina Marie Langford Johnson, 29 years old, also shot to death in the attack, leaving behind her daughter, Faith, who miraculously survived despite 2 bullets piercing her car seat. She was rescued after a harrowing 10 hours, and she was the last survivor found. Maria Ronita Miller LeBaron, 30 years old, and her children, Howard Jacob Miller, who was 12, Crystal Miller, who was 10, and twins, Titus Alvin Miller and Tiana Grisel Miller, both 8 months old, were all brutally shot and burned alive. Their lives were cruelly cut short in this horrific event. Their deaths have left a deep void, and the brutality of the massacre that day has left profound scars, but the memory of their lives will forever remain in the hearts of all who knew and loved them, and both the strength and the survival of the children serve as a testament to the enduring power of love and family. So sorry if I got names wrong.
No, you did good.
And we'll have an episode.
It's a hard list. Yeah, it's a hard list to hear.
Your story, it made national news, and all the articles I look up, it involves, like just in the title, Mormon family living in Mexico. Do you want to start there, like how your family ended up in Mexico with your story, or where do you want to start?
Yeah, let's start there, and then I'll maybe go into like kind of the day of stuff. So I'm from a small town in Mexico called LeBaron. It's been there for 80 years. It's a little piece of paradise for most of us that got to grow up there. I tell people it's a small town life at its finest. Little small town in Texas where you get to drive tractors and drive cars at 13 when you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
Very free, little dirt roads everywhere. So the Mormon colonies in Mexico have been around for over 100 years. All the way back in Brigham Young's days, they sent down settlers to Mexico. They sent settlers to Canada. You have your Mormon towns that were started throughout California. It was a huge part of, the Mormon mission, even, their original roots coming to Utah. And so when I describe my hometown, it's just one more of the many breakoffs, that that are part of Mormon history. Colonia Juarez is, maybe about, 35 minutes, 40 minutes away from my hometown. And it's a very traditional LDS town. There's a temple, you have all your missionaries and everything you'd see here in Utah. But my grandfather broke off from Colonia Juarez, kind of started their own religion in their own town. They're called Mormon breakoffs, Mormon fundamentalist breakoffs.
Yeah, the FLDS.
Yeah, but people think of that as like one thing, and it's not. There's hundreds.
There's several splinters.
We're not several, hundreds. Like it's just there's a lot of breakoffs,
well
right?
said, yeah.
So we're just one more of the many, and it started just as a ranch. LeBaron is just my grandfather's last name was just his ranch. Today it's booming town, honestly, beautiful. We all loved it so much. We all went all over the world and, started businesses and made money and go home and buy our ranches and plant pecan orchards and plan on moving there now or retiring. Most people in my family because it's a beautiful place to live. I always describe it to people as think like Chinatown, right? Or like Italian neighborhoods or Jewish neighborhoods in New York.
Little Amish community.
Yeah, but not. There are Mennonites, which are a little bit more that are really close by us. That you would more like Amish communities a little bit more.
What is a Mennonite? Is that like
a Mennonite? They're German descent, but they have I would say Amish is really close. If you had to find the comparison. So they are much more Amish. We're just intermingled within our, so it's like its own town, but the neighboring towns are touching it and it's all intermingled, right? So it's kind of, and we speak English there and multicultural for sure, but from food to music to, religion to, in every way, it's just like a little bit of a mecca, so to speak. For sure still has its very Mormon roots and a lot of hardcore Mormons, original fundamentalists and stuff. But today I would say what we have in common in LeBaron and as a people, because that's kind of how we think of ourselves. LeBarons are considered one of the largest families in the Americas, 7,000 to 10,000 people. It's huge.
Yeah.
So, but we aren't a religion or shared beliefs, it's the shared history, right? And so LeBaron kind of represents that to me. Of course, it's a fundamentalist town. My dad's a polygamist. He had 39 children, and I'm only the sixth. So I have a lot of family. And that's just my dad. That's not counting all my cousins and all this huge, huge, rock that I come from. But I myself am not Mormon, and a lot of the people from my town aren't.
You said you're not LDS or FLDS. Can I ask you what are you?
So I was
Free
always
agent right now.
So I was always consider myself agnostic. My husband and I raised our kids agnostic early on, but I would say I'm agnostic because I had a strong faith in God. I've always had a very close relationship with God. I just was very meh about religion. Well, if you need to belong to a gym, but you can find your faith. That's kind of how.
I like that analogy. Yeah, I work out at home.
Yeah,
I got some dumbbells.
Yeah, that's exactly kind of how mine and my husband's approach was a little bit more into religion. It's within you, and God has a relationship with you, and
the thing I've learned about grief and trauma and talking about it is grief doesn't care if you're polygamous or if you're not or if you're atheist. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't.
And
And
that's one of the things I love about it. It brings all of us together, no
oh,
matter race, wherever you're at. That
yeah.
feeling of when you lose your loved one, I think it's very similar for everyone.
Oh, it's true. Universal experiences, no matter where. The best moments in life are universal. It doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter where you live in the world. A, a baby being born and losing someone you love and falling in love are all like the same. They
Yeah.
feel the same for all of us. I do agree with you. And grief is huge. Grief is a huge part of all of that. And it's kind of, I always say with grief, it's weird because you think, like in my case, I have all this huge family and they're incredible. Like my mom, my parents, my life is. So I always would say, like, well, I can't really fall because it's like you're almost like string cheese, right? Like you're being held so tightly and all hugging each other that if you go to fall forward, well, someone's there to catch you. And if you fall backwards, there's somebody else there, right? I just had support and love from all angles, right? And
Yeah.
that's what being a part of my family and my community, honestly, and all of them was. But true grief is when you're all by yourself. Like that's when the wave actually hits you. Because like if someone's with you, their presence holds it at bay.
Yeah.
But
I
when you're
think
by yourself,
crying in the dark closet all alone.
that's what I'm saying. It happens to
That
everybody.
that's one of the
So I'm saying, I don't
worst.
care if you
Like,
in
why
the
do I
shower.
exist? I don't want to exist. This is not good.
My sister-in-law says that she just would wake up at 4 in the morning, no matter how much they talked it through and they loved it. All of a sudden, my brother died would be holding a pillow, just sobbing his eyes out, breaking down in the shower. But that's what I said. I've learned that no matter how much support you have in the end, that what you have to go through in your own heart and soul and person, it's like it is lonely. It's by yourself. That's
Yeah.
when it hits you. That's when it breaks you.
Yeah. I think going off that, kind of stand on what we believe in religiously real quick is I think one thing that shifted for me after I lost my family was I think this concept of God is going inward.
Yeah,
It's
I do
going
agree.
in within myself to find the best part of myself and bringing that out is kind of more like heaven is within you is what Jesus would talk about type of thing.
I do. I
So
did
that
end
yeah,
up
that's kind of
going
what I think.
to we I had always kind of wanted to, like, what should I teach my kids, right? I wanted them to know God the way I felt I knew God, but I didn't know how to give that to them, right?
Yeah.
Like that kind of full circle. So we had kind of tried out different Christian churches and stuff when they were younger. But after all this, I did end up like, honestly, I was going to really search for answers, like,
This
Buddhist
happened in 2019,
2019. So it's been 5 years. So
which what does that mean to you? 5 years, like nothing, like yesterday, or what is that even like?
it's like the before and the after. I don't even.
No, yeah, I know what you mean. It's kind of like your life before you had kids, and like you don't even
Yeah.
remember
Like,
almost.
well,
Like,
who were
what
you?
did I worry about? Like, I don't know.
I know, and it makes you such a different person. I'm sure like you feel bad for other humans. Like, I can't relate with you and your small things right now, and I know you need love, but like, I can't even relate, you know. And
Well, we always do this thing where like we talk about don't compare grief, but then like there's levels to this thing. Like, let's be honest, and like you're like usually I have like the bad heavy story hanging in the room, but you're like this is next level of this is out of this is worse than a horror movie. This is like unmanageable. Like
it is.
I don't
It
know
is.
how. I don't
No,
know
it
how
is.
you're
It
here.
feels impossible to tell the story. And honestly, from early on, like we as a family chose, I call it open wound healing, right? Like they say, don't let a scar over, you actually scar worse. You have to like, so I would give this to my family for sure is that we chose to talk about it. And we never, not even to the kids, because part of you is like, should we hide? My sister left 3 orphans behind, you know, and they had to know what happened to their family. I mean, they were burned. Like they had to know, they know this. My kids, it was honestly so sad. But like heart and touching. But my 2 kids were in the back, and I have kids the exact same age as my sister's 3 that she left behind. And so, but
Sorry, I just want to clarify real quick. Your sister in the obituary I gave is the one that has the two twin
yeah,
eight
they
month
were the
old
ones that were burned.
that were burned.
So we should probably go into like the whole little sequence of events because it is crazy. But my son and my daughter are chatting in the back seat, and he's 5 and she's 8. And he's like, "But if they're burned, does that mean they're like naked when they get to heaven?" And my 8-year-old is like, "You're so dumb. Like their bodies are burned. They don't take their bodies to heaven." "Oh, okay. So what do they take to heaven?" And it's like most heart-wrenching conversation you've ever
Like these
heard, right?
kids should not be talking about
Talking
this.
about this. But then, well, if we hide them from that,
Yeah.
it's worse. I think it's
I
worse.
think 100% it's worse.
So that's their story. They had cousins that were burned. And they, to hide them from the truth of that, they know anyways. So who are we kidding, right?
Yeah.
You know, the adults are all there. You had a funeral, people are speaking about it. So you're not saving them from the knowledge. You're just saving them from talking about it. And so we just talked about it. We just talked about what happened and what we were going to do about it and our fight. And we talk about it at the kitchen table. And we still talk about cartels and what's going on. And it's just part of their story. And we can't, I wish that it wasn't, you know.
Oh, I just love this so much and relate with it. Like, I think this is absolutely what you should do on how to handle grief is to talk about it. And I'm sure you probably had moments where you're like, why are we talking about this?
Oh,
Or should we be talking? It's so hard. It's so
no,
bad.
it was like, oh,
but then like there's this tipping point where if you keep like talking about it, it makes it easier to handle and to fight and to do something. And if you talk about it, you can start to understand, okay, here's some things that are in our control. Like you find that stuff out when you talk about the pain of all the thing that's outside of your control.
Oh, for sure.
That's another thing I've learned too is, eventually you get to this point. This is me in therapy. I eventually got to this point of, like, I can see more things I actually have control over instead of just crying over all the stuff I have no control over.
No, it's true. I completely agree with you. And it just, in the end, even saying their names, because what happens is, okay, so you're like, no, I'm going to keep talking about, I'm a storyteller by nature. Like, I'm not going to stop talking about my sister. But you could tell, especially in the first year, like, everybody in the room would be like, oh, she said her name, you know?
Yeah.
Like, no, we are going to keep
Why are we scared of her name?
We are going to say all their names.
Why
and
are we scared of them?
talk about them.
Yeah.
I refused. I refused to shut them into a box. My whole family did. We said, absolutely not. We put their pictures everywhere. I mean, my mom, we got this from them, right? It's like, no, like they are with us always and we will never. And so, and you can tell. And to this day, people are like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no, like talk about them. It's okay. Like you almost have to coach the person who's trying to tell you they're sorry because they just get all, and you're like, no,
it's kind of like,
this is what we do.
Like, I know they're dead. Like I deal with it every second of the day.
It's
You're
okay.
You're not reminding me like, oh yeah.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I forgot.
It is a weird thing, but I was like, as a family, we said, no, absolutely not. This is the way we're doing this. And I actually do. I mean, there's no such thing as a healthy way to grieve. You know, we're all, everybody's dealing in all their ways, but I think that we've done the best we can with all of that. I really do. I'll have to give that to my parents and my siblings.
Yeah, I mean, family. The strength to talk about. Can you so you grew up in Mexico, you like it, right? It was a good childhood. And then I want to talk about your day that day, like when you got the news, like where you were at. And then I want to talk about maybe the experience of what happened, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So we were actually up on Victoria. We had gone up to Vancouver, Victoria Island, and all that for our anniversary. And when my husband and I had woken up that morning, there had been too much fog. So the seaplane that we were supposed to take back to like Seattle, we couldn't, it was postponed until the fog went away, right? Mm-hmm. And so we were kind of just putzing around, kind of going into the shops, getting some thank you gifts for my sister that was been watching my kids, killing time until we could get off, just killing time. And I was in a little shop and he's kind of listening to some message and he's like, I don't understand. I'm like, well, what's going on? You can kind of tell in someone's face, And he said, I I don't know yet. Something about Nita and a Suburban. Let me just go outside and like listen, and then I'll let you know. And I kind of just kept looking at him. And finally, I walked out there. So the very first message that came through, because so we live in Mexico, so WhatsApp is like everybody has a WhatsApp group. Every family has a WhatsApp group. It's like internet messaging, so it's huge in Mexico. And so you have like your town groups, your community groups. You also have your family groups and the huge families. So you could see how every recording just spread like wire, immediately. One goes out and it's in 100 places in 10 minutes. So that's how it was. So a message had come through that Nita's car was bullet ridden and on fire. It was the first message we got. And I'm just obviously just devastated. And I was actually listening to one of your podcasts, and they talk how when you start talking to God and you're making deals with God, like in my mind, I'm like, okay, like they're just kidnapped. Like maybe they were taken hostage and then the vehicle was left.
And like maybe denial, like bullet ridden and on fire. Like
Yeah,
what are
who would
you
do that?
talking?
That's
Yeah, like,
just that's not
what are you
possible. So
talking
they
about?
must have just left it burning after they took them, which is something cartels do. So it's not outside of what's normal. Well, whatever normal could be, but it's nothing that I hadn't heard of. At some point in this crazy life, I was like, hey, but now I'm imagining them taken hostage in my mind, like little Crystal, and she's 10, and Howie and the twins and my sister, and at this point, I don't even know that the other 3 kids aren't with her. Like I'm on vacation. So it's not like I talked to my sister the day before, because and I think I talked to her like a week before, but I was taking off on this trip. So I didn't know, like my other family probably knew, what her plan was for that day. My sister for sure did. My mom did, but I didn't. So I don't know what's up with the other kids. I don't know what's going on. But I'm freaking out. But I'm just okay. They want to charge ransom. Like hopefully, like that's what's going to happen. But hopefully they don't rape them. Hopefully that's what's going through my mind. It's more horrible, the most horrible thing in the whole world. But like raping and injuring and hurting them, kind of more like that kind of fear. And we're walking back to see if we can get on that seaplane because either way we're going home. And my husband just walked like 10 feet in front of me, and he's listening to the message. And he turns around kind of in the middle of the street, and he tells me, they're all gone. They're all burned. They were all in there and they're all gone. And I just fell to the floor sobbing. Life shifted forever. It was the most, you can't even understand something like that. It's impossible to even comprehend that something like that could happen anywhere in the world. That a woman traveling with her babies, that could happen to them. It's just impossible. It's still impossible. Honestly, still have to almost compartmentalize that in order to get through days. At this point, nobody has said anything about Dawn and Christina. I don't know any of that, right? Nobody does. The messages start coming in. At that point, I learned that, the other 3 kids, which is such a gift and a blessing. And I know it seems weird, but Nina just never traveled without all her kids. When she was going to Phoenix to pick up her husband, Howard, and she wanted to get some stuff done. And it was just too much with all of them. So she had taken the 2 oldest to help with the 2 twins and left the other 3 behind. And probably 1% of the time that ever happened, ever. So I know that the 3 kids, and then now we know that Dawn and Christina are missing. So this is like 10:30 in the morning. And this happened like a mile from her home. Don't think she's out in the middle of nowhere. This is like her backyard. I mean, a mile she's been on the street tons of times. Yes, it's remote, but it's her remote, It's areas that she lived in. So what had happened was that Nita's vehicle had broken down. So all 3 girls, so to give a little bit of context is that in Mexico, violence had been escalating. but nobody could have imagined that it had escalated to that point, right? And
Yeah.
so like even me when growing up, like there was a guy who'd owned a grocery store, that up and just left. I mean, he'd been there for 25 years and took his whole family because he was being extortioned too much, So that was something I knew. A decade before that, I had a cousin that was kidnapped, and his older brother became an activist, and they ended up murdering him and his brother-in-law because of his activism. So it's like we weren't completely naive to the fact that things had been escalating, right? But it's like, I mean, you have thousands and thousands of people. These are all your homes and stuff. So it's like you're trying to be more careful, but you haven't quite gauged the full reality of how far the cartels have come, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in that, these three women did decide to kind of caravan through that mountain pass together, which they'd been on forever.
And they took how many cars?
3 separate Suburbans.
So each mom had a car.
Had her own car. And they were going different places. They were actually only together through that mountain pass, right? Because it's kind of a shortcut. Like the highway adds like 3 hours to the trip or whatever. Or you can take this little mountain pass that they've been on hundreds and hundreds of times. But it's a little mountain pass. So Nita's car breaks down, and Donna takes Nita back to La Mora so she can borrow her mother-in-law's Suburban. At this point, Christina is like, I ain't waiting for you guys. I got to get out of here, and takes off. So we now know that Christina was most likely the first one to be murdered, not Nita, even though Nita's news came out first, right? And Christina was up, I'm going to call it 9 miles away up. And she actually got out of her vehicle, put her arms up, and they shot her anyways. And then it was only Baby Faith in that vehicle. And that's why nobody knew Baby Faith was there, because there wasn't someone old enough to tell anyone. Everyone just assumed they both had died. And then, so Nita and Donna have this separate incident, and Nita's getting her car. Obviously, she's going on a trip. She's transferring car seats and, luggage. And Donna dropped her off, but then Donna left. She said, it's getting late. I got to get going. They didn't really think they were being precautious, so they weren't worried enough to. When Nita gets to Suburban, she doesn't wait for her brother-in-law, who's getting like a trailer and stuff to go pick up her broken down vehicle. She just borrows her mother-in-law's Suburban and leaves so she can get going on her trip as well. So she shows up to the spot, and she actually transfers all the luggage and the children herself. Nobody was with her.
And then she shows up on the same spot as the...
So these cartels were actually all spread out throughout the mountains. So she's only a mile from home. The other women were murdered 9 miles from home.
I did not know this.
So they're not in the same spot. That's why I tell you it's a very convoluted story. So Nita takes off, and obviously that's when they say, was it like, did they not know? And we're like, she's right there in her Suburban, transferring luggage, transferring car seats and babies. I mean, these guys are all up there. Like, no, of course they knew. They didn't care. They want to control the whole area. They just didn't care. And so Andre shows up. Nita's car is broken down there. She has already left, right? And it's fine. Everyone's in a hurry to get to where they're going. It's like you're trying to make it to where you're going before nightfall. So, they're traveling, so they're trying to get out of there. And he sees smoke. Andre, her brother-in-law, who's, figuring out what happened to her tire and the bearing broke and is about to load it up. So he has a truck with a trailer, and he sees smoke and decides to drive up and see what's happening. And that's when he sees the vehicle riddled with bullets and on fire. He can't even get close enough to know what's happening. And he actually sees men running down a ravine. And he's scared. He doesn't know what's happening. So he goes back to the Mora to ask for help. And that's when that first message comes through of what happened, but we still don't know that their bodies are in there. We don't know. So he asked, his dad, a bunch of them all get together. They even took a drone up there to go see what was happening, and they show up, and there's actually a video out on YouTube.
I saw
but
it
this
for
is
about
for the records.
I saw it for
and my
about
four.
8 seconds,
Yeah.
and I started crying.
I mean that's when that video is taken.
Is that the grandpa?
That's the grandfather.
Yeah.
So that's Nita's father-in-law, and that's when the world changed forever. And you live in a world where that's possible, you know. So you don't think you live in a world where that's possible, and then now you have to wake up every day in a world where that's possible, you know. And it changes you forever. So now you have both communities. There's still gunshots up in the mountains, but they know these other two women are missing. They have no idea. There's also gunshots. So do they rush in there? Do they wait?
So I just want to clarify. So the first car that was on fire was your sister,
My sisters,
and her two twins.
her 12-year-old son Howard, her 10-year-old daughter Crystal, and her twins Titus and Tiana, and they were all shot up. Howard tried to get out of the vehicle. He was shot point blank. There were shells, and then they burned it. There's Crystal, when we had their bodies, Crystal's was in like a fetal position, like she'd been hiding in the back seat. She was found in the third seat over, the two twins in their car seats and Howard. And it seems like, why does that matter? Why does your brain go there? But I swear, as a mother, like, I just wish that Nita had a gunshot to her head and never knew, right? Never knew that her babies had to die like that. And that but then that means that Howard had to be the one that was the last one, or was Crystal the last one, or who? And your mind just goes over and over, like, how was it for each one of them? Which ones? The forensics team says that with the level of guns and the calibers, that they were almost likely still alive, shot up and alive when they lit them on fire. And it's just, as a mother, like, you could go through anything, but to me, the fact that Nita had to die knowing that her babies were going through that is something, the hardest thing for me. Like, I just, that she had to know, that they had to know that they couldn't protect each other, that they couldn't save each other. And I don't know, it's the part that's just too much.
I think, no, and I don't know how you do it every day. And are you still in so much shock, you think? Your brain just can't quite go there all the time, or you do sometimes and it's just miserable?
So honestly, it's just, what happens is, on a day-to-day life, like, so they didn't die in a car accident, right? So it's like, if they died in a car accident,
They died in the
worst way you could die. As a mother, there is no worse way to die.
I think you're right. Yeah.
It's just, I don't care what horrors exist in the world, this is the worst way to die as a mom, hands down. And Nita was the most sweet, and it's just, when I saw her body, when they uncovered her burned body, so the forensic teams, I'm going out of line, it's just so much to tell.
You're good.
But when the forensics teams finally show up, so the entire Mexican government was informed at 10:30 in the morning what was happening. And they never sent police officers, they never sent anybody, right? And not only did they not send anyone to help, they kept holding everyone back. No, it's not safe. They're like, there's women and children up there. Like, what do you mean it's not safe, right? Like, we have to go find our kids. So I'm sitting there trying to get off Victoria, and Dustin, I'm just like sobbing. And he tells me, babe, they're telling me that your parents are joining a group from LeBaron. This is 3.5 hours away. And they're going to go up to the mountains to find the kids, to find out what's going on. And you need to call and tell them that not to go, that it is dangerous and not to go. And I called my dad and I said, Dad, I'm so scared. Please don't go. Don't go. And he told me, I am going to get my daughter. If you want to pray for me, pray for me. But I'm going to get my daughter. And he said, here's your mom. And I said, but Mom, I'm just so scared. And she's like, Adriana, I'm scared too. We're all scared, but somebody has to do it and they're not going to do anything about it. So she was the only woman that was part of that caravan that went up there. And so they're 3.5 hours away. But when I tell you, like, the criminal negligence on behalf of the Mexican government at this point is it's just
You
unreal.
chalk it up to they're terrified of the cartel.
Terrified, colluding, all of the above. Mexico is being held hostage by cartels at this point, completely as a country, in my opinion. The whole country is being held hostage. So not only are they not coming, but they are actually, so if you've ever been to Mexico, there's actually like military stop points all throughout Mexico, big, guns, AK-47s, and they stop you and it's, yeah. So they keep getting stopped. So not only are these military not helping them,
they won't let anyone help.
They won't let them get there. And they keep stopping them and stopping them and stopping them. They would have been there by 1 or 2, right? But they keep stopping them. And finally, they're like, we are going. Like, what are you guys doing? And we, of course, believe now that they were actually creating time to let them get away. That's the way we see it. Like, now that we've gone into the records and the reports and all of that. But at this point, David Langford is in Phoenix, Arizona. And when he got the news, and he actually meets up with them in the town right before they head up into the mountains.
And so, can you just clarify, David, who is that?
David
how does he
Langford
fit into
is the widower of Donna Langford. So this is his wife.
His family.
His family. And he got the news when he was in Phoenix. And they take so long being stopped constantly that David Langford now made it to that kind of meetup point. And they head up to the mountain pass together, and it's it's family. It's not the government, it's not cops, it's not police, it's not agents, it's family. All men from the community got together, and anybody who could go be of service. I don't even know the number, 20, 30, but a good group of them. And my mom was sitting next to David Langford in the back seat when he gets the call. So what happened was, his son, Devin Langford, and these kids that are all shot up. So we know now that from the kids that Anita's car is burning, right? So when Donna shows up to the scene, they see Christina on the ground before they even get to it. And they actually start trying to like freak out, reverse, and the car gets shot up. Donna gets shot and dies. Kylie, I believe the story I was told, is holding the little brother when the shot comes. She doesn't even know that the other little brother is shot up, like almost goes to get him and realizes that he's died. And so it's crazy because some of them walked away with no gunshot wounds and other ones were shot in their arms. It's just, it really is like in the movies, that horrific, right? So these kids got all shot up. What happened was, there's multiple different stories, the versions of what happened. Did opposing cartels start showing up and they got scared and left? There's voice recordings in the investigation that say that they were told that the LeBarons are coming, but people from LeBaron are heading up there and decided to leave, But they leave these kids, so they don't burn them. They actually leave the survivors. And so these poor kids don't know what to do. They don't know.
But your family willing to go up there sounds like you saved some of them.
They did. The families from La Mora, I mean, their testimony, they said goodbye to their loved ones. They literally said goodbye to their, the men that said, we'll go, like, had to tell their wives and their kids goodbye. They didn't know if they were going to come home, It's the amount of courage that was shown that day. It's incredible. So you had people on the La Mora side, right, heading up, and then you had people coming from LeBaron, right? And that's kind of after being held back by government officials all day long. So Devin makes it back after 9 miles. I mean, gunshots going off. He said at one time he was shot at again. So he ends up leaving the main road and falling the river because gunshots started coming at him. I mean, this kid's, I think, 15 years old.
14 years old. And he goes down. He's taking so long that his 9-year-old little sister that has a gunshot wound to her arm starts walking for help. Imagine they're all shot up in the mountains for hours. They tell the stories that however they can get home, that at first they started all walking together, and they would pick up one injured kid and walk like 20 feet, leave him in the middle of the road, go back for the other injured kid, walk 40 feet. You know, they're trying to make it down this mountain, and they're just not getting anywhere, right? And they decide to hide because they're just too wounded. There are just too many injuries. Hide in like a little tree mountain pass and off the road, and Devin is going to go for help. But he's just 5 hours past. It's hours and hours, and he's not back yet. Nobody's come. So that's when 9-year-old Mackenzie takes off to go try to find help. So at this point in my story, I'm flying home. Like, I'm actually on flights, so I'm like, by the time I got on the flight, I knew that the women were missing. And I think when I landed is when I found out all who had died, right?
How long is that flight?
Well, so they ended up getting us a flight off of Victoria that was like an airport further away that was a real plane because we couldn't get off, and then to Seattle, and from Seattle to Salt Lake to pick up all my kids, so we're just in our own little,
Are you just?
I'm just.
Are you crying?
I'm shocked, crying, but almost comatose. It's like
I don't. Just a zombie almost.
Yeah, and so as this information's coming in, like we all describe it as in like, well, we just took like a gunshot size. Our whole chest is bleeding. It's hard to process more on top of that.
I'm sure part of your brain is just running wild with the worst.
Well, now my mom, my dad's up there, everybody's up there. I mean, you're in war at this point is how you feel. Like your body is in like a, and so these kids get home. So my mom tells the story that she's in this vehicle with David Langford, and his son Devin has finally made it back to the home to inform them that his mom and brothers are dead, Christina's dead, and that his siblings are all shot up and they're in the mountains. They need to go rescue them. And my mom was sitting next to David Langford when he got that call. When he, like she says, a father's grief, just guttural grief. At this point, they think Faith is dead too. Everybody assumes she's dead as well. So they finally make it, and it's already dark now. This first call was at 10:30 a.m. It's already dark at this point, and they show up, and Christina's body's on the floor. It's the first thing they see, and that's when they check in the Suburban to see that baby Faith has been there, the whole time. She's alive, and my mom said that they handed her to my mom. She was like the first person to receive her, and that she had been crying so much, obviously, that she didn't have a voice. She didn't even cry anymore because it's like you tell she'd already exhausted,
Yeah.
completely soaking wet from, peeing and stuff in diaper, but so dehydrated. No one had a bottle, and they would give her little capfuls of electrolytes.
I'm sorry. I need to ask this question. I'm so sorry because you may have explained it. I thought the car was burned. That Faith.
No. Faith is my sister's car with her twins, Titus and Tiana. The other two vehicles weren't burned.
Okay, so
this is Christina and baby Faith were in their own vehicle.
Okay, and they did not light that.
They didn't light either of the two that were 9 miles up the pass were never burned.
Okay.
Just
sorry, that was my confusion.
No, it makes sense. Yeah. And the truth is, if they'd chosen to burn them, they would have all died.
Right.
Like you never know who would have survived the other vehicle if they, had not burned. It is a point. So baby Faith, they find baby Faith, and then the family that was coming up from the La Mora side that had already found the children run up to David and tell him that the Mackenzie's missing and nobody knows where she is. That she had gone looking for help and nobody can find her. She never made it to La Mora. And it's actually the dad. I think that's so powerful. He says, my mom said he went instantly from grief mode to save my daughter mode, like, because his wife's body's there and his son's bodies are there and he's there. And it was, I have to go find my daughter. Like, I have to put this grief in place and go find my daughter. But because he knew the area, he said, well, you can't see La Mora's lights from the mountain pass, but you can see another town's that way. I wonder if she took the wrong turn and followed the lights. And that is actually what happened. And she had lost a shoe. She'd thrown it at a rattlesnake. And she had one shoe on and one shoe off. 9 years old with a gunshot in her arm. And the first thing she said was, take me back. We have to go for the kids. Take me to go find the kids. She's, the story is so insane. It's so impossible. It seems something so much worse than you could even write or invent or, but it's real. And what I try to tell people is, if you could take one thing away from my work and my reason for just being willing to tell the story, is that it's still happening. Is that what happened to my sister and Christina and Donna and their children that day isn't a one-off. This is happening in Mexico every day. That's why we're here. That's why we're having this podcast. People ask me all the time, are you doing this work to heal your broken heart? Absolutely not. I'd go home and love my babies. I'd go on trips with my siblings. I'd just go enjoy the people I love until there's nothing left to enjoy. But this is happening to another mom right now, Every single day there's 100 deaths in Mexico. Murders, not deaths. 100 murders in Mexico every day on average. 200 fentanyl poisonings on average every day in the U.S. And that means 300 mothers every single day are never going to see their child again. Are never going to see I don't care if that child's grown. I don't care. They still have to live with that news. That's still the heartache that's happening in our countries. And nobody's really paying attention and nobody's really creating effective policy. And it's happening. And that's why we're still fighting. And that's why we're still here. It's been 5 years. They've arrested people. We have fought with everything we have in Mexico to find justice. And they've arrested 30 or so people, but 5 years and they haven't sentenced a single person. They have the video of the guy that said, burn him. And the guy hasn't been sentenced. I mean, they're just waiting for us to get tired enough to let them go, until we stop showing up to every single trial. We had to fight the Mexican justice system to even be allowed into the courts because the justice system is not part of the Mexican justice system. Organized crime is considered a crime against the state. And it doesn't have victims. We had to fight to be recognized as victims. We've had to fight to tell the stories, And that's a lot where our foundation was born. It's just, you can't not know. Once you know what's happening, you can't go back and not know what's happening,
Is it... First of all, how are the husband and the kids today? Like, what are they?
The kids, it's crazy stories, honestly.
Take your time. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
And I just have so many questions. Also, like...
I mean, we could go. I have a all over the place brain. It's so many aspects.
Like you're 90%, the battle you're fighting. You don't want to say stuff like too extreme, but like the amount of bravery your family has shown in the actual incident yourself, like these kids, what they're doing, and the dads, and the bravery you guys have shown after. Like, no one wants this battle. Like, this is terrifying. And then the other question I have to kind of attach to that one is, your whole world has been brutally just massacred, and you're trying to do something about it, and no one gives a shit.
No, it's hard because
like no one else want, like no one's. How many people are willing to help you? Probably not a lot.
Well, honestly, like when you tell your story, there's been, a huge amount of support. It's more, I think, nobody knows how to.
Yeah,
It's
where
not
do
that
we
they're not willing
where do we
to. It's like
start?
the world is just like, how do you confront a problem this big? But then how do you not? Then how do you not? So one of the biggest things that we've tried, and we will continue to push for this, and we've gotten a lot of like the political side effects, but having Mexico designate the cartels as domestic terrorists. What they do isn't gang related. It's not just gang on gang. It's not a little looking for a little bit of drug. They're taking over governments. They're holding entire towns and counties hostage. They are murdering people to gain control. This is a lot bigger. They match every check for terrorists. And international terrorists, domestic terrorists, and the only reason we get pushback is, well, it affects like trade agreements, and it affects, asylum cases. And you're like, well, you can't really cure cancer if you're not willing to admit you have cancer.
Yeah.
So I don't know
Like,
what to tell
no,
you.
I think it's a great response. Like, where do we start? It's such a big issue.
It is, but then the way I look at it is, okay, there's a tsunami and it's coming, it's happening. You're seeing that in the fentanyl overdoses, you're seeing fentanyl poisonings. You see that in the 100 murders. It's the most horrible tsunami,
The
but
sex trafficking.
human trafficking, the border violence, the migrant issues, I mean, the border needs so much help. It's not even funny. Like, I just like the amount of help that is needed everywhere. It's like, but what's your number is what I would tell people. Like what would be the number that would make you feel like you had to stop?
Like, how many families need to be burned like this?
So we're at 200 fentanyl poisonings a day. So if we hit 300, will the world stop and take note? Will 400? Like, how many? So when I was growing up in Mexico 20 years ago, it wasn't so like this. Like, of course, there was always mafia. There's drugs. As long as there's a demand for drugs, cartels are going to exist. But this, like, brazen, in your face, walking around with their guns, we own this town, there ain't nothing you can do about it. That wasn't the world I grew up in. And so now we're at 100 murders a day and it's been normalized. So, I mean, Sinaloa has got to be, as a state, at 200. I mean, full civil war, I was telling you guys, with what's going on down there. So at what point does the presidents on both sides come down and sit at the table and say, we got to work together? This should be an all hands on deck, like everybody working together. This is way too big for one nation to face. It's way too big but they're not. So as civilians on both sides of the border, we actually have to stand up and say that we expect you guys to do something. We expect better policy. We expect you to work together. We expect, that's how it's always been. No one's coming to save us. It's all us.
I love this mindset of this is happening to other families, and so we're going to do something about it. I love that, because that was very much my mindset. That's what my therapist told me. He's like, Mason, someone's going to lose a spouse, kid tomorrow. You can help them. And there's a lot of power in that idea. And I had that same thought process. It's like, there's going to be another terrible accident probably tomorrow.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, what can I do to help them now that I've kind of sat in their shoes? I just think it's so brave and commendable. So thank you. How are the kids and
Okay, yeah,
how are they
go
doing?
back to the question.
Sorry, yeah.
No, I'm glad. Good, that's because we have to. So as beautiful as they can be, right? It's good. In the beginning, it was so hard. I mean, Tristan was 8, and I swear he would come. He had to sleep. They were kind of back and forth between the grandmas and with their dad, and trying to come together. And he would fall asleep listening to the headphones. You know that song, I was getting kind of used to being someone you loved. And I can't hear that song without sobbing anywhere. That was his song. It's still his song. But he would listen to these headphones. He couldn't fall asleep without the music, but he needed to be asleep next to you. Like, if my mom wasn't home, because obviously he'd go sleep in grandma's bed, but when I was in town, he'd come sleep on the foot of my bed. He had to be, he's 8, so he actually didn't want to be snuggled, but he wanted to be with you, And just the questions that they asked, honestly, it's just the most, every moment was so heartbreaking. But today, so Howard has remarried, and I adore his wife, Lauren. I think that Nita sent her to them. I think
I feel the same way with my current girlfriend knew.
I know that she was heaven sent. She is the sweetest person. She offered love and structure, and she's a cute girl. She, she's just so adorable with them. She ended up she has two little kids. They had two kids together. She had Irish twins on accident, right? But I'm telling you, when that first little girl was born, the photos of my little nephew, the five who was 5 when his mom, my sister was murdered, holding that kid, like I knew they were gonna kind of maybe be as okay. Like there's just something about feeling like you're part of a family again, and I mean the smile on his face, and they come. We just had a family wedding on my side of the family, and they came to the wedding. They didn't. They would have stayed at my house, but there weren't enough rooms, so they stayed somewhere else. But the 3 kids were at my house nonstop. My Nita's 3, and they spent spring break with me, and they are amazing. And so David Langford is the only one of the 3 that was a polygamist, and so his wife, obviously, she took all of Donna's children and raised them, and I mean, they all have their own stories, and they're survivors, so their trauma, they were there,
Yeah,
and
I can't
yeah,
imagine
and
these kids and I mean all of you, like the rest of your
Tyler,
life, the trauma
yeah.
that you have to
No,
face.
Christina left 5 children behind, so she was traveling with just her baby, but she had 5 kids, and his dad tells the story that he just went into a big walk-in closet, sat down with them, and had to tell them all what happened to their mama.
I
And
I had no idea what you would be like today. Like we've never met. I'm just shocked at with how well it looks like you're doing. Like I just like you're smiling like they're like living life, which you should be doing. Like, yeah, you should. But I guess what I'm trying to ask is like how do you look at the world now? Like when you go out and people are complaining about whatever like how do you function? Do you feel like an alien on this planet now? Like or
so
what is
I
that
don't
like?
know, like I've always approached the world, and honestly, it comes from my mom, my dad, my parents, like that kind of bred in resilience. And they had gone through a lot in their lives as well. My mom lost siblings. I had a little sister that died when I was 10 of pneumonia, actually medical error, but she had pneumonia in the hospital. And, like trials and just how life happens, and you have to get up and be. My mom is the happiest person you've ever met by nature. Like that's just who she is. And so you
But
have
like
this mom that's like that.
life happens. That's not what
That's not life.
happened.
This is not
That's
life.
not what
Yeah.
happened to you guys.
It's not. But then you think, okay, so like talking about questioning faith and stuff, right? You're like, well, how could God let something like this happen, right? And how do you find faith? Because I have like leaned way more. I actually have a little more honor for like church and ritual than I used to. I'm like sometimes when you're just that low, just showing up, to something where
Well, the community
a
that it
routine,
provides.
it really does. So Des and I have gone to a Christian church now more, and it really does. It helps me. It helps me because I don't know, will and all the different versions of the life, that Nita had, and to know that I would see her again, right? That I would know her, that our bond is longer than this life. And one of the hardest things I have a hard time with Nita is, so imagine like you tore the photo in half. Like not only did her children have to die with her, but then she left the other 3 behind, right? So then those little orphans, like how was your heart not broken, right? But I don't everybody handles grief differently, and I from day one, my family, honestly, and even my community, because they have just been to say, I mean, all of our work was crowd funded just from our family within that network of being a part of that town and who we're from. Um, but when you have that much like resilience, right? Like from day one, it was no, we have to do something about this. Like, what are we going to do about this? Like, we were kind of angry, like, and so
Well, when you're talking about your grandpa, like no, I'm gonna go look for my daughter. Like that's anger. Like
Yeah, my
the
dad,
the
yeah.
anger part of
No,
grief is
yeah.
so good sometimes. It
Yeah,
will
he was
get
my
stuff
dad was
done.
like, "I'm going to find my daughter." Like, don't
Yeah.
I mean, he don't
I think that's what you guys are so upset. I'm sure there's part of you like, what can we do with
what can we
this?
do? And so I do think that that gives you like a little bit. So we innately within our faith and or however we were raised, like have always found ways to be happy, very joyful about life by nature. So I'm not like a depressed kind of person. And obviously I went through all my stages of grief. You know, we talk about like the anger stages. You think that the stages of grief are like linear, right?
Oh, I talk
Like
about
you
it
get to
all the time.
nicely fit in this little pattern.
And then you graduate with acceptance.
Yeah,
Like, did you reach
no,
acceptance?
no,
Like I did on Tuesday, but not now.
Now,
Like there's nothing.
in any given moment, in any given, but you do all of a sudden when you're past like a phase. Like I remember talking with my sister about like the anger phase. Like you think that when you hit that angry phase that you're looking at the world, but no, it's actually that you're just angry. You don't know why you're so angry
Mad at
about
everyone.
everything. Exactly. So she's like,
And
no.
someone's like, "Hey, how are you today?" And you're like, "Shut the fuck up!"
Yeah,
Right? Like
you're
in your
like, "You
head, you're like, "I was just
assholes,
like, what are you doing?" And like,
like your small lives don't matter to me.
yeah,
You know?
you're just mad.
And she was like, I remember clearly this conversation with my sister and her being like, no, yeah, like I have never been so upset about chips spilling in my car in my whole life. And I'm out of line. I know I'm out of line. And why am I so angry? But you'd go through 2 months of just being like, just upset, just high strung. And that's not who you are. And then you have like, you think depressed is sobbing in the corner, but no, it's like someone just turned off the lights. You don't know why, you know? And then you're, acceptance, like they said. And then there's, but like you said, it's sometimes you go through whole months and other times you're it's day to day. You know, you go through all of the stages in one day.
Or
Right?
like shock. I still think
The
I go
shock
through
is
long
still
periods of shock still.
no.
And you said it earlier, like you're still like you have to decompartmentalize with it is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But it's I relate to this so well. Like you're still trying to have it like soak in a little bit because it's so and like reading the obituaries, and I experienced this with my family. Like when you get to the second, third one, it's just the weight of it, and you have to go 9 people, and then there's kids that were injured, and like there's just so it's unheard of. It's
So
terrible.
unheard of. And I honestly, like I said, we all deal with it differently. Everybody's unique at the end of the day. We do have shared experience and we do talk with each other, which is kind of like a gift. So not my mom, but like my sister. Honestly, one of the hardest things was seeing each one of them because I wanted to carry all their pain. But when I'm traveling to go to my sister's funeral, I had to see my brother William for the first time, and I had to see my sister Leanne for the first time. And every time you saw each one of their faces, because we have this shared pain now, this shared grief. So in one way, that you have these people that 100% know how you feel, right? Because you're in this boat together, but you also want to take it for them. You don't want to see someone you love. And then I look so much like her. Like I'm the sibling out of all that look by far the most like her.
You do look like her.
And I had never been to La Mora, so I show up there and everyone, even her husband, walked up to me. He's like, "Why the hell do you gotta look so much like her?" Like every time I turn around. So we're there. And so when I first show up, they actually did like a caravan. So they made they were going to have a caravan going to La Mora through the mountain pass at 2. At this point, we don't know what happened and why. So everybody's still very much on edge. And so when I show up there, I meet up at this like checkpoint I see a lot of my siblings and I have that moment with some of them, right? But some are already there, because they weren't in Victoria.
Yeah.
One of my brothers was in Italy, came all the way, from Rome. And so we show up to this like apartment that Nita's mother-in-law has in like the back, of her house, like a whole separate building. And the bodies are there, but they are so when a forensics team finally showed up after 24 hours, my mom sat with their bodies and she stayed with them, sometimes by herself because they were searching for other people and dealing with all the other chaos. She's incredible, most incredible human in the world. And she said they showed up with garbage bags and wanted to put their bodies in garbage bags, and she told them to do not touch them, absolutely not. And they literally sent to, Nita's mother-in-law's home and asked for like, they ended up paintbrushes from paint room and sieves from like to have a body to bury, and very carefully took as much as they could, right? And so they had these bins and sheets that they'd laid them in, but they were all covered, right? And they actually, as a family, in La Mora, they make all their own coffins in the wood shops and stuff. So they had been making the coffins, and the coffins were ready. And my brother-in-law dug. So at this point, all my half siblings, so this is my dad's family, all of us are in there. There's just a whole. I actually have a photo I'll show you of all of us in this room. And Doug says, so I do not recommend that you guys stay as we transfer the bodies to the coffins. It is going to be the most horrible thing you ever witness in your entire life. But she is your sister, and I do not have the right to tell you that you can't be here. So if you want to stay, stay. And if you need to go, go. Like, it's up to you guys. I think 2 of my sisters left, and they walked right back inside 2 minutes later. And we were all in there. Not nieces and nephews, none of the children, but, all of us siblings. And so when they uncovered Nita's body, it was like the chunk of her torso, right? Because obviously everything that's lighter burned, charred, but it's her, it's Nita. And I just remember I'm so sorry, Nita. I'm so sorry that you had to die this way. I'm so sorry that this happened to you. I'm so sorry that you had to know your babies were dying. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Like, I just wanted to hold her. I actually just wanted to take that pain from her. Like, my heart was more broken for her than for me. My heart is the most broken for her. I feel strong enough to carry it for her, but she had to go through that. And I tell people, I literally, I wanted to touch her, but you didn't even know where to touch. So I just remember her lungs. Like, her lungs were like, they're the strongest part of your body, I guess. And they survived the burning. And so I just put my hands on them and said, Nita, I love you. I'm so sorry. I promise I will do everything in my power to make this world a safer place for Tristan, Emma, and Zach. I'm so sorry. And then they uncovered the twins, and the twins were like, because they had been in the car seats, like, it was almost like a traditional little skull. You could literally see the little sockets perfectly. Like, you could literally see their shapes and everything, and we swaddled them in little blankets and laid them on each side of her body. And then they uncovered Crystal. Like I told you guys before, she was in the tightest fetal position. So her body's burned, but in like the tightest fetal position she could be in. And we said prayers for each one of them individually. Like, said a prayer, blessed them, put them in their coffins. But all of a sudden, my husband's looking at her, and there's like this bright pink chunk of leather, like right here, bright pink. Like, how did that survive the burn vehicle? Right? So if you look at pictures of Crystal from 2 years old on, she never didn't have a purse, and not like a little baby purse, like one of her mom's old purses. Like, she always had a purse. And all of a sudden, I think one of my sisters says, "It's her purse." And we just all burst out sobbing. It's a little chunk of pink purse. And it's just, I don't know. Howie was more of him, I guess, Howard Jr., because he was half out of the vehicle. Already just, 12, already growing. And, and just different people said the prayer for each one of them. That, we put them all in their coffins. And just try to get it through each moment. I mean, I wrote their eulogies. I went in Nita's backyard and I wrote hers, I just kind of tried to, everybody kept showing up trying to hug you and stuff, and I'm like, I have to write these eulogies. But for Howard and Crystal, I actually sat down and I told my nieces and nephews that were their age, I said, I'm not going to tell you what to tell me to write, but I just want you guys to sit there and tell stories about them. And as you're telling stories, I'm going to see if I can infuse a little bit of that innocence of your guys, of what their life was actually like into the eulogies,
Mm-hmm.
And it was cute. Some cute little stories, came up and different things that I'd never heard before. And I missed the first part of Donna's funeral because I was feeling the pressure to finish the eulogies. Venus was going to start right after. So they did do separate funerals, because there's just so many family to mourn,
So did you do 3 funerals?
Yeah, so the way that it happened, when I showed up to Donna's funeral,
Sorry, can I say something before we keep moving on? The fact that you saw these bodies I'm just blown away by it, and I'm so sorry you had to do that. I think this is an important part to talk about with grief, though. So looking back on it, are you glad you saw them all?
100%.
Yeah, that's what everyone says on the podcast.
It was the most, you felt that, like, I always think of God, or even, like, when I think of Jesus, it's just like he just loves you so much and wishes you didn't, like how I feel towards Nina, right?
Yeah.
Like, he just wishes you didn't have to go through this, and he's so sorry you have to. So it's like you felt like a veil was lifted, like you were as connected as you were ever going to be with life and the reality of life and birth and death, and it felt sanctified in that moment. I don't know how else to put it.
No, I think because I only saw Frankie, and I was told like the rest are really awful to look at. Courtney, you can look at her hand if you want. And now I really do. I mean, after talking to you, people like Colin Campbell and other people I've had on the podcast, like I do think I should have seen them all.
I actually think it would have helped.
I 100% think that. My other question is, so the only body I saw was Frankie. It wasn't a scratch on her. She looked beautiful. I have that memory run through my day. Kind of, it's just, I see that throughout my day. How are you doing?
How do you not see that every second of every day?
Like, how do you manage what you saw? Like, how do you, or do you not picture that for some reason, I just see Frankie's dead body, like, just flash in my head throughout the day.
So I'm telling you, like, when my dreams and it was like, it was more like the moment. What flashes through my mind more is that, like, how did it happen? Like, I don't know why my brain was so obsessed, because it feels less now, but in the beginning, with who died first and why, and where were the twins, and were they alive, and did the car seats, if Faith survived, then did they burn alive, and what happened?
Wow,
like,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
See, I was different.
So way more that accident itself is actually, and I wasn't there, but that's where my trauma is. If I had to describe a moment that I wish wouldn't play that does, it's that.
Yeah. And
real quick, mate,
sorry.
There's something going on with this.
Like when you go home to an empty home, it's just a different feeling.
Like, I'm glad you said that, because it wasn't just people we lost, but like, like I went home to a loud room or a loud house with 3 kids running around, and now, like, and I remember going home and it's just silent. Like, I can't, like,
yeah, you just run away from that. And that's what I'm saying. Like with Howard, like he had his 3 kids, and I honestly don't know if he's fully, like, I think he maybe still has a lot of grieving left, It's like, because you do, In other words, like, I think he did shut it all up more,
This is the husband?
This is my brother-in-law.
Okay. I think about
the survivors,
so
the kids.
The 15-year-old.
Oh, I know. And I know her, and I mean, it just, I'm around her, that she lives here,
like,
and
true hero.
No, incredible. I mean, the kids and everyone just has, like you said, you can't measure grief, and like you start going down this list, and I mean, my mom showed up to that vehicle. She saw them, like how does she deal with her trauma day to day, and my dad and Howard and.
Well, I think you talking about it has helped you.
Oh, 100%. I know.
And that's what I was trying to say earlier. Like, you seem happy and you're smiling, and I think it's because you talk about it. so much, maybe, and that talking about it allows you to live with it better.
I do for sure. Like, I mean, I can't, you say that. I was listening to your podcast, and every time I hear you say that to someone, I think, yes, just keep saying that, Mason.
Thanks.
That's the trick.
And I want to get back to this funeral because this is brutal, but I love it. So your community builds the coffins, you're burying them. Okay, you were going along, and then I interrupted you with seeing Frankie. Want to get back there though, like.
So
where you
at
were,
the
sorry.
funeral, so I show up and David Langford is giving a father's prayer, and it's the most gut wrenching thing you've ever heard in your whole life at the funeral. I had gone to the viewing the night before, but I had just missed a little bit of the beginning. Like I said, people kept showing up to give me their condolences, but I still needed to try to do my part in the eulogies. And then Nita's service was so that was at Donna's home in her yard. So we're from like rural towns. Everybody, it's not the first time you had to bury your family and do it all yourself. Like that's what you do. You know, we a little bit vintage, old fashioned, so to speak. But I mean, it's beautiful. I had one of my sister-in-laws on my husband's side tell me that she was sharing the stuff with her mother-in-law. And her mother-in-law was like, wow, like we don't grieve our lost ones like these people grieve. Like, it's, the rituals of from the bodies to the coffins to the, and I believe there's a lot of healing in all of that. And I do think it's super important. And I think it's good for the kids. And, it's part of their story too. And it helps them.
How is your grief transition, like the first couple months, first year into, it's been 5 years now?
So for sure, like, I mean, when I think of that first year, so I told you guys, that I'm leaving. So, I mean, I'll roll into that question in a second. So I'm leaving. So we're at Nita's funeral, and there was a bit of an argument about where to bury her. And my family was like, in our town with us, we want her home, and they just assumed, the other family, that she was going to be there. And my mom tells a story that she went into Nita's closet and she said, because we're actually staying in Nita's home, right? So we show up to Nita's home. It's the most surreal experience ever. My sister is like, so we're just this loud, crazy Latin family, partiers, like insane. But she's like the sweet, like homesteady one. She likes to hand make everything, and we all have a little bit, but she's like homeschools her kids. Like she's one of those, right? She's the sweet one. And we go in her bathroom and don't think there's like fancy lotions. No, there's like a cut off piece of aloe vera, like raw. Yeah, I mean, you would just have to know Nita.
Put some aloe on it.
Put some aloe on it, but like as organic as it comes, right? And there's homemade bread on this like thing with the glass dome on it, sitting there, right? And it's like the most like Nita thing to show up to in the whole world. It like breaks your heart, but it's like so beautiful at the same time. Like you're like, this is just Nita.
It's so her.
This is so her, And 1,000 little chaos, Crystal wanted to be a writer. She has all her books. We're in her house, all her handmade American Girl doll clothes and all her little books that she'd write. And it was just, I mean, the wounds, it was like so beautiful. Nita had next to her nightstand her like religious like idea, like it was almost like a checklist of things she wanted to work on and how to see the world. Like if you have a testimony, even if life is hard, it'll be a good life, if you follow your beliefs, learn about this, create your own testimony, write it down, learn more about this, study that. I mean, I have the list. It's this little handwritten thing. It was just so every corner was just so neat. So it's like you almost feel like she's telling you, the whole time, she just really is, it's like that's okay. And I don't know how to tell you. It was, if you leaned into it, she was just everywhere, if you were willing to
see it. Looking for it, yeah.
And so my mom goes into her closet and says, like, you know, she knows my whole family is like, absolutely not. And she doesn't want there to be a war and like, you know, if you don't let people die with grace, you know, Nita, I'm just really going to need your help on this one. You know, I don't want there to be animosity. And so and then she called Howard, and Howard said, don't worry about it, Suegra. Suegra's mother-in-law, right? Suegra, I'll take care of it. Nita was buried in the barn without an argument or fight or a signal. She's like, dang, you work fast, girl. um, so because she wasn't going to be buried there, we had like a celebration of life that night with, and we're just like, we're a mixed culture. So my side of the family, like his side of the family are like a little bit more like what you think of as LDS, you know, they know their hymns and they all play the piano and,
Gotcha.
you know, and then there's my side of the family. We're just loud. I mean, tequila and songs, all key and candle. we're
Yeah.
just a disaster. But with all heart and love, like the biggest, most loving family. But so we're all singing at the celebration of life, and it was just so like perfectly because Nita always liked. She was that kind of like a homesteady type, so she could a little bit fit into their world in a way that the rest of us probably couldn't, you know. And she liked the hymns and she liked all that. So, you know, when I remember one of her sister-in-laws telling me like, well, what would Nita like? I'm like, no, Nita, this is perfect. She loves, you know, my dad is spilling candle wax all over the coffin and some tequila because we're singing back and forth. And it's like not so saintly, you know, but she also loved their side and all perfectly on key, you know. And it just was, I don't know, a combination of both worlds. It was super beautiful, like in its way.
Because one thing I learned about grief is maybe especially in the early stages, you're just so caught up in how they died.
Yeah.
And especially your story, it's so brutal. So it's so easy to just spend all your time on wondering how could this happen and why. But there's another part of grief, which is you get to celebrate the life they had.
Yeah.
And I think when you're able to talk about the pain, it allows you to talk about the joy and the life that they had and not just the way they died. And I think that's an important transition people make in their grief journey is they also lived a really good life and you should celebrate that, even though it's unfair and horrible.
No, my brother said, he's like, who are we kidding? We would go through 1,000 of this grief for the 30 years we had with Nita. We already know we would sign up for this all over again. You know, we know that we would. So,
I mean, when someone says that and they lost their job or maybe they lose someone, like, okay. But you really think that? I mean, you lost 9 people in the most brutal
obviously,
way.
I would hope it never happened. But if God said, you're going to go and be part of this family and you get to know this person and this is what's going to happen to this person and it's going to change your life forever, but you're going to have known this person, I would not say no to have known her.
Thank you. I wouldn't have. I'd say the same thing to my family.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just think it means so much more when someone like you says it.
Well, hey, you don't measure grief. You went home to no, we don't trust me. When I hear your story, it's like, so I'm telling you, like, I still went home to my family after all this, you know, like, you know, here you're the widower, you didn't, you know.
I was going to ask you, and maybe this is more for the dad, like you're kind of getting at, but like I have this real problem with, it's really hard for me to just think and grieve over one of them without spilling over to the other one. And I have this weird guilt about it. Like, I wish I could just have a Frankie day. Do you experience that, or is that any
so
of that
one
going
of
on?
I'm telling you, I did listen to some of your podcasts and that's a question I heard and I thought, oh gosh, he nailed it because there's so much truth in that. So when so my foundation's name is Ronita Vive. It means, Ronita is my sister's name. It means Ronita lives. And it doesn't say it's Howard Jacob. It doesn't say.
And so you feel
Krista.
bad.
But we had to choose that. And then there's Don and Christina, and their families aren't as active in the activism. They didn't go that route. They left. They said, we don't want any part of they're supportive, as in like, you guys are amazing, do what you do. But like, no, like we're going to go heal, you know? And it's beautiful. I respect it so much. So, but I'm always having to try to find like how And I finally came to the conclusion it was too much. Ronita stands for all of them, and she's the connection I have. So it's okay that I use her as, to propel that, a little bit, that she means all of them and she stands for all of that grief. And it's all you couldn't come up with a name that said Howard, Crystal, Titus. It just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
But my sister Ruth said something recently to me, and I thought there's some truth to that. She said, I actually don't think I've processed Howard and Crystal yet. Like the twins, So I had this little moment. It's because they're just stages. Like you said, they're just stages. So at first, just with your faith, I had this moment where I was like, maybe imagining Nita being welcomed to a heaven where she met up with people that we've lost, met up with she had a friend die when she was 16. I had a sister, grandparents, a lot of, maybe it was a glorious welcoming for her, maybe it wasn't hurt devastation, maybe, I don't know. I don't know what it's like to see Jesus and to feel his love for that moment. And I tell my kids, no, I think you just walk up to Jesus and you're just you want to tell him all the reasons your heart is broken, and he just looks you in the eyes and says, I know. And then that's just love. And it is. And that's what so if she's having those moments, right? But then she knows we are grieving and she sees her orphans. So then there's this whole pull, right?
Yeah, you get it. Like
Yeah,
it's a web.
It's a web.
So
like your brain just
okay, if it's this, but then these three pull. These three things are getting pulled.
Was torn in half.
Yeah, so it's like, okay.
So when a family's torn in half, it's really impossible to kind of even know where to put it. So I feel like I've really grieved Nita, and I feel super connected to her. And and then I had this other moment, like 2 weeks after, or a couple weeks, so I kept imagining her holding these little twins, right? And then I had this moment where I kind of thought of them as kind of like warriors, even though they were male and female. Like maybe they were less attached to this earthly life. Like maybe they actually helped her and Howard and Crystal. Like maybe they were the stronger souls, and like maybe they were sent to help them through this because they knew they were going to go through this. So I've never quite thought of Titus and Tiana as little cutesy babies anymore. Now to me, they're like these strong, like warrior souls that really helped Nita and Howard and Crystal with that. But Howard and Crystal, I mean, gosh, 12 and 10. Like I said, right now I'm thinking about it, but when I go out and I do my work, I can't think about that. Like if I think about that too much, I can't. No. It's just, even the babies, like I can't, you have to try not to, but you still talk about them all the time. But you can't really
it's like if you dwell on it,
you can't dwell on it too much.
You can't live a life almost.
Exactly. So
you can't be in the moment for your other kids. You can't it's a balancing act.
It is. Yeah. And you have to try to do your best and the truth is, I don't know. Like I had someone a friend tell me, because I just could not get over that this had happened to my Nita, and she said, well, and she believes a lot in reincarnation and stuff. And she's like, well, Nita isn't attached to this version because now that she's died, she knows all the lifetimes she's lived, right? And all the lifetimes Howard Jr. has lived and Crystal has lived, and even Tristan, like this misplaced 8-year-old that lost his 2 older siblings. You know what I mean? Like just,
there's so many,
it's just so many angles. How do you deal with them? And I'm like, okay, like, I don't know if that's true or not, but that helps me. It for sure helped me, like to think that there's an all-knowing maybe, that soothes her. If that makes sense at all.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've really leaned into Christianity a lot more and just, that maybe all these things that I thought were so unnecessary, in my home gym church that we talked about, like maybe those little routines and rituals and showing up, that they're given to us because when you're that low, you need to just start somewhere,
Yeah. It's October or something, but we're going to post this episode on November 4th. That's the anniversary of
5-year anniversary.
how do you refer to this? A massacre? Or what do
It's
you
a
a
massacre. Like, we
massacre?
went back and forth, and we were like, call it what it is.
Yeah, I
you
was
know?
trying to like, what do you
Yeah.
call this? Can you maybe explain what you're doing for this
Yeah.
anniversary?
So right after, honestly, so moving on to our nonprofit and what we've started to do as a family. So when we were in Mexico City, December, like December 2nd feels right after. So we're talking a month, or, November 4th, 2 months after the massacre. We were invited to a march, and it was an anti-government march, anti-president. The then president of Mexico's policy was hugs, not bullets, against the cartels. We're gonna fix these cartels with social programs. And meanwhile, there's 100 murders a day. Areas of Mexico completely left untouched. And what happened was people kept coming up to us. We had dual citizenship. It got a lot of international attention. We were invited to see the Mexican president. And so they're like, they're listening to you guys. Tell them about my brother and my mom and my dad. They were murdered and the cartels took over their home. Tell them about my daughter. She was 16. She disappeared. And people would come up to us in these crowds, and we'd go back to the hotel with like flyers and handwritten notes and people telling us their stories of what was happening to them, was just being ignored all throughout Mexico. So we decided that would be like kind of what the nonprofit did, right? That it would help. And then now it's just grown, in 1,000 ways. We do a lot of work, but so we started Ronita Vive. It's we have offices in Utah, a female nonprofit, my mom, my sister, and I. But that doesn't tell a story. It's like a whole family thing. All my half brothers and sisters are just incredible. Have supported it. Money. I said we used our grocery money to start it, but also just my whole community in the town. I mean, they've been the backbone from day one on all this. It just would have been swept under the rug like every other thing happening in Mexico if it wasn't for all of them. So we do. We take on pro bono cases. We've do a lot of lobbying for legislative change in both countries. Really trying to push for any
Wow.
kind of a policy.
You guys are amazing.
But it's crazy. I mean, the work is heavy. Honestly, if there's a load on me, like grief is one, but I mean, I'll be home. I have 6 kids, they're all in sports and living their good life, but I have take on cases, there's 40 families in this area of Mexico. The Mexican government refuses to show up to help them. They're requesting aid from the nonprofit to get their women and children out of the area. They would, we ended up facilitating that, getting the children and families out, and then pressuring and convincing reporters to show up and report on it because everybody was too scared to even go report on what was happening. And that's just one of all the cases. It's happening all over. We've, we helped fund indigenous groups from all the way up north, kind of where I'm from, that live up in the mountains where there's just ghost towns now because cartels have just completely taken over, and help them get to Mexico City just to tell their stories.
What's that quote that it goes like all it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's popped into my head a couple times with your story of, man, like so many people just they're not bad, like they're not killing people,
No.
but they're not like, I'm not gonna do anything about it though.
Yeah, that's so, and we're just gonna keep on.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, this is gonna not go away, maybe even get worse, unless people like you to talk about it. I think just talking about it is a good starting point.
What's scary is that it even has to get worse to fix it, right? Like it's not going to be they decided, President of the U.S. and Mexico decided to get together and they're going to do something about it. It's not going to be that simple.
Is it money? People, some guys, is it money? Why is the world so messed up?
So money for sure. But, like I said, even in Mexico, you say, everything was so corrupt. And you're like, there's a lot of corruption. But there's also good people that are told, here, take the money and do this. And they're like, absolutely not. I'm for my people in Mexico. They're like, oh, you're so cute. Take the money. I know where you live. I know where your kids go to school. I know Mexico's being held hostage by cartels to make an estimated $60 billion a year.
So when are we going to wake up and decide that maybe that is important enough to talk about and that we need real policy?
Well, it's just the ultimate example of 1090. Like,
Yeah.
the unimaginable happened to you guys, but it happened. And calling it 10% seems wrong. Maybe we call it 80%. but there's also this, like, what are you going to do about it? And I think what you're doing, I a hero for sure. Like, I'm not blowing smoke in your face. Like, that is
Well,
so,
thank
you're
you.
a true warrior. And it's weird because in your mind, you're probably like, I don't know what else to do. Like, I don't, look, what's my other option?
That's
But
what I'm saying.
like,
I don't want to
because
be.
that's how I feel too.
I
People
wish
are
we
like,
were saving
how
dolphins.
are you doing this? I'm like, I don't know what you mean. Like, what else do you want me to do?
In other words, this is what showed up. So probably like 3 weeks, my husband and I were working out, and he's like, I think we should meditate, after Nita was massacred, right? And there was so much angst. Like, we're going up against the Mexican government, we're calling them out on their bullshit, we're fighting, we're pissed, and not everybody's on board our plan, and we're like, well, we don't care because the truth is the truth. And so I'm in my meditation. I'm like asking Nita, Nita, what should I do? Like, should we go to this trip we're planning to DC? Should we go to this march in Mexico City? Like, tell me, I don't know what to do. God, like, help me. Like, is this a mistake or not? And I always say, so she was biting her fingernails in my little answer vision. Like, she was scared and nervous. But she told me that it was the most important work in the world and most needed, but that it was going to take all of my life, that I would be doing it forever. So not to neglect my kids and not to neglect my family, because it wasn't like a little race. It was like a marathon, and that we had to find the balance between our lives and the work, because it would be with us forever. It was never going to go away, and it was going to be hard. It was going to be scary, but it was going to be forever. So I always try to go back to that. Like, she's there, God's there. Like, if anything, the grief is one thing, but the pressure to do something, the pressure to say it, the pressure to make a difference, the pressure to save a life, that's actually the hard thing to deal with.
Wow, I feel that too, because I'm a believer in, okay, so why did it happen? I think that's up to me. Like, it's up to me to make it why it happened, which sounds cool, but like you're saying, like, there's pressure, like, there's anxiety that comes with that. Like, I need to do something then, and part of your grief brain doesn't want to do anything. You're just depressed, and so it's hard to be motivated. It's just
it is. It's hard. You're like,
it's hard.
I don't want to go spend the anniversary of my sister's massacre, like, truly in my heart. And I mean, I do in my heart, but like, it's like, if it wasn't a massacre, I would honor them and give balloons and watch Disney movies with my kids, eating popcorn, and we'd all snuggle and love each other. But instead, I'm flying to Mexico City, having another activism event, my 8th one this year, like, trying to bring attention to what's happening, trying to make a difference, working with other activists. So you're like, they didn't die in a car accident. I don't get the luxury of mourning them by myself. Like,
Yeah.
the world needs to know.
It's just, it's weird that I grew up worshiping like Michael Jordan and like Steve Nash. Like, those are my heroes, and now I'm a little embarrassed. Like, there's people like you out there doing
But
cool
it's
things.
beautiful. Like, that's the thing that I've learned, is that, well, what are we fighting for if not that, right? Like, isn't my fight so that your kid and her kids can grow up only thinking about Michael Jordan? Like, that's the goal.
There you
That's
go.
the goal.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful. It's a beautiful goal. I want them to care about, the games, and that's a beautiful life lived. So, and it's, but we're going to fight hard when we have to fight hard, and that's, yeah, like I said, that's the innocence, the beauty of it all in the end.
Before we wrap this up, is there anything else? I mean, I don't know, just think of our audience. Anything else you want to talk about with grief, or your 10%, 90%? Anything that comes to your mind?
There is nothing in life that you can't overcome. There's just not. I do think that what we went through, outside of it happening to my own body, like, which I think would maybe be easier in some ways.
Some ways, for sure.
You
yeah.
know, like, so I can tell you that you're still going to care about dumb things. If you're buried in grief right now, and you're going to sometimes feel bad that you care about dumb things, but you're going to, and that's life and it's beautiful. But there is literally nothing that you can't come up from if you want to, if you just see the beauty in life.
If before the massacre happened, if someone came up to you and said, "This is what's going to happen tomorrow," do you think you're strong enough to do it? You'd be like, "There's no way." But for some reason, when you're thrust in the situation, like, you are able to survive more than you think, I think.
I think that there's resilience in all of us, and the human spirit is innate, and we do, and we want to laugh, and we want to love, and we want to live. At the end of the day, I think, people have those really dark moments, and they do. But I think when they pass those, that there's that equal, desire to, I don't know. I think.
And I just want to, I know I touched on it earlier, but I just see it so much with you is if you go where the pain is, you also get the joy. And just watching you talk and just watching your face and your heart just break as you're explaining things, but then 2 seconds later, a smile. It just kind of peeks in all this darkness because you're able to remember something good about him or what you loved about him. And I think that is grief is, yeah, it's going to be hard to talk about, but you're going to still feel love for them and they're still almost alive. And there's joy within that misery. And with your story as dark as it is, to see that in person is just really, for me and someone in my situation, it's very inspiring that life can continue to get better for me. And it doesn't have to just be terrible. I deserve to be happy, and I can be happy still. Those are things I'm getting from your story.
Amen.
We usually do top 3 favorite. Are we in any mood to do movies at the end? Or I don't know.
Yes, movies are wonderful. Movies are what you go home to.
The goal is we try to have something kind of lighthearted at the end.
Gosh,
so our listeners aren't like, okay, or books.
Books are good, yeah.
Or TV shows.
No, we're a book family. Book's good. Let's go book.
Top 3 favorite
We're
books.
all readers.
Also, real quick, what are you being for Halloween this year?
Oh, of course, you had to ask that. I'm usually all out. I love Halloween.
Me too.
And this year, I just hosted a family reunion sized wedding at my house, and it's 60 people there, and staying there, and fed 100 and something every day. So I haven't touched on Halloween yet, but I'll come up with something because I got all the kids figured out, and we're still gonna have fun because my biggest job is to make sure that the little things still matter. That's what I want to tell you guys. Like, in all of this work, like, the little things matter. Like, lean into them. That's what I'm telling you. Even the rituals of church, all the things that you do, like, I promise you it's where the magic is. Like, what are we fighting for if not Halloween and good movies and good books? And
like, why are we going?
That's the life I want to create.
Why are we going through this misery if we can't enjoy Halloween?
Yeah,
what are
like
we doing?
that in this book. So let's say Outlander, because I remember when I recommended Outlander to my sister.
Outlander was just recommended by Jonas, maybe?
Yeah, it was good. And the series is really good. But before the series, I recommended it to Nina, and she's like,
this was Outsiders.
What did you say?
Outlander. Outlander's like
tomato, potato.
But it's like 10 books, and they're all 1,000 pages long. And Nita called me up, and she's like, "Why would you do this to me?" And I was like, "What? What do you mean?" And she's like, "I have children. I can't get lost in a 10,000 page books for the next 3 months. Like, I have responsibilities, and this book is way too good."
Get it on tape. Books on tape.
Yeah, I know. I do a lot of the Audibles, so I loved all those series. I love Ken Follett. I love the Sentry trilogy. It's an incredible book. Bronze Horseman. It's another trilogy that's incredible. So we'll go with those 3. Everybody go home and read those 3.
Yeah, I'm not much of a reader, I have to admit. But those sound good, yeah.
Yeah, I even now, like, I do a lot of Audibles because I can't read as much as I want to. And I'm just, I like all this Sarah J. Maas stuff too. I've been,
It's good stuff. But we talked before it was cartels and changing the world. We talked a lot about books in the house. Like we still do, but obviously life shifted quite a bit. But that's always been kind of who we are.
You know, I needed this episode. I needed to meet someone like you.
Thank you.
You're great. And yeah, just all the things that most people would tell you. I just wish the best for your family. It's just such a brutal thing. And I'm a big believer in talking about it, talking about hard things. And you are a tremendous example of that with your story. So thanks again.
Well, thank you. And I think you're doing amazing. Like I said, I started listening to your podcast and stuff, and I can see that the message is resonating and that you're helping a lot of people. And I actually think it's incredible. So
Well, thank you very much.
Keep going strong.
Life's 10% what happens to you and 90% what you're going to do about it.